The darkness in Letchworth village was consuming, an oppressive weight that made it impossible to think. The faint beams of their flashlights flickered like dying fireflies. Illuminating crumbling walls and rusted equipment scattered across the floors. Derek tightened his grip on the camera, its weight oddly comforting in his hands. Every creak and distant thud sent waves of unease through the group. The air itself felt alive, thick and heavy, as if it carried the memories of every terrible thing that had ever happened here. "Do you hear that?" Lisa whispered, her voice trembling. A faint sound drifted through the air, distant but unmistakable. Screams. They weren't the echoes of memories or the tricks of old pipes. They were real, human, and agonized. Lisa froze in place, her flashlight trembling. Derek swung the camera toward the sound, catching Mike's pale face. "We should leave," Mike hissed, his voice cracking. Before anyone could respond, the scream erupted again, louder, closer. It was sharp and guttural, filled with pain, and layered with something unnatural. The group turned as one, their flashlights darting into the black void of the hallway behind them. A shadow moved. It wasn't like a person. It was something faster, fluid, and wrong. "Run," Derek said, his voice barely audible. Then louder. "Run." The group bolted, their footsteps pounding against the cracked linoleum. Lisa screamed as she tripped over a fallen chair, scrambling to her feet just as a guttural growl rose from the shadows behind them. The sound of claws scraping against the floor echoed like nails on a chalkboard, setting every nerve on edge. "Don't look back," Derek shouted, but he couldn't resist. Swinging the camera around, he caught a brief, horrifying glimpse of the thing pursuing them. It was hunched and skeletal, its limbs too long, ending in claws that scraped hungrily at the floor. Its face was a nightmare, a twisted blend of human and beast, with empty black sockets where its eyes should have been, and yet, it seemed to see them, its head jerking unnaturally as it closed the gap with terrifying speed. The hallway forked ahead, and Mike yanked them toward the left corridor. "This way," he shouted. But the shadows moved with them, spilling forward like a living tide. The air grew colder, their breath forming mist as the temperature plummeted. The flashlight beams flickered erratically, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock them. A deafening scream pierced the air. It came from Lisa, who had been yanked back by something unseen. Her flashlight clattered to the floor, spinning wildly. Derek turned, his camera catching her flailing as clawed hands erupted from the shadows, dragging her into the darkness. "Lisa!" Derek yelled, sprinting back toward her. He swung the camera like a weapon, the hard plastic casing connecting with something solid. A guttural snarl filled the air, and the creature recoiled, its form briefly illuminated by the flashlight's beam. It was worse up close. Its skin was stretched too tight over jagged bones, and its gaping mouth was filled with rows of needle-like teeth. Black ichor dripped from its claws as it lunged again. Derek grabbed Lisa by the arm, pulling her free just as the creature swiped at her leg, leaving 3 jagged gashes. She screamed in pain but managed to stumble forward, leaning heavily on Derek as they fled. "This way!" Mike shouted from ahead, his voice desperate. They burst through a door into what had once been a cafeteria. Rusted tables and chairs were scattered across the room, and the faint stench of decay hung in the air. They slammed the door shut behind them, Derek bracing his body against it as Mike jammed a broken chair under the handle. "Will that hold?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking. The answer came immediately. A deafening crash rattled the door as something massive slammed into it. The chair buckled but held. For now. Derek swung the camera around, panting. "We need to keep moving." Lisa was about to respond when the room plunged into complete darkness. Every flashlight flickered out at once, leaving them in an oppressive void. "No, no, no," Mike muttered, slapping his flashlight. It sputtered weakly to life, casting a faint glow that barely reached the walls. The glow illuminated them first. The shadows. They weren't normal. They writhed and twisted, creeping along the walls and ceiling like living things. Shapes began to emerge from them, humanoid but wrong, their limbs too thin and their movements jerky, like puppets controlled by an unskilled hand. A deep, guttural laugh filled the room, vibrating through their chests. It wasn't human. It was ancient, mocking, and filled with malice. "Move," Derek said, his voice breaking. "Now." They darted toward the far door, the shadows surging toward them. Clawed hands erupted from the darkness, swiping at their legs and backs. Mike let out a strangled cry as one of the claws raked across his arm, leaving deep, bloody gashes. He stumbled, but managed to keep running. They burst into another hallway, the air somehow colder. Their breath came in ragged gasps, visible in the icy gloom. Lisa's leg gave out and she collapsed, sobbing. "I can't," she gasped. "I can't do this." "You have to," Derek yelled, pulling her up. The whispers started then, soft at first but growing louder, more insistent. They came from everywhere and nowhere, incomprehensible but filled with malice. The shadows surged forward again, and this time they brought something new. A figure emerged, taller than the others. Its body was draped in tattered, blackened cloth that seemed to flow like liquid, and its face was obscured by a hood. The air around it seemed to warp, bending reality itself. It raised a hand, and the whispers turned to screams. Lisa clutched her head, falling to her knees as blood trickled from her nose. Derek grabbed her and ran, dragging her along as the screams followed them. The shadows clawed at their heels, and the hooded figure seemed to glide after them, its movements slow but inevitable. They turned a corner and saw it, a broken window, the faint glow of moonlight streaming through. "Freedom!" "Go!" Derek shouted, shoving Lisa forward. Mike reached the window first, pulling himself through with a grunt of effort. Lisa followed, sobbing as Derek helped her through. The shadows surged forward, faster now, desperate. Derek turned to follow, but was yanked back by an unseen force. Claws tore into his shoulder, dragging him down. He screamed, swinging the camera wildly, its lens cracking as it connected with something solid. "Derek!" Lisa screamed from outside. With a final desperate effort, Derek lunged for the window, but clawing his way through as the shadows reached for him, he tumbled onto the ground outside, gasping for air. The screams stopped abruptly. The night was silent, save for their ragged breathing. They looked back at the building, its dark windows staring back like empty eyes. Derek lifted the camera, its cracked lens still recording. He aimed it at the building, the red recording light blinking faintly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in one of the upper windows, a shadow moved. A pale face appeared, its empty sockets staring directly into the camera. The guttural laugh echoed once more, and the window shattered. They ran without looking back, the sound of claws scraping against the ground chasing them into the night.